Josh is sick, so thank you, Mandy, for praying for him. We're believing he's going to be restored in a full manifestation. And we're grateful that Nate is, as the Bible says, apt to teach. And I really wanted Sunday nights to be different than Sunday morning, so I want to give different people a chance to share their gift with us. So not just Nate and Josh, but other people too. And I forgot, I did want to announce before Nate comes up and kills it. Next, do you guys remember Lynn Hiles that came here and ministered here? When we went to his Leaders Only Secret Conference in April, which basically is open to anybody, but he makes you feel cool because he's got a secret Facebook group and stuff like that. The most powerful minister of that time to me was his son Jeremy. And Jeremy has grown up a kingdom kid. He's never really known religion and legalism. He's really only known new covenant kingdom reality. And he shared on perspective for like 30 minutes, and he shared on parenting for 20 or 30 minutes just in a Q&A session, and we were absolutely wrecked. It was so powerful. And he's going to be here next Sunday morning, and I forgot to say that. I'm as excited, probably even more. I hate to say even more because Lynn is awesome, but he's a little bit different than Lynn. It has a little bit of a different outlook because Lynn grew up in the most horrible imaginable fear-based legalism. You've heard him describe it. We're drinking a Coke sent you to hell, and he couldn't graduate high school because he wasn't allowed to take PE because he had to wear shorts in PE, and literally had to get his GED because of the denomination's rules. But Lynn had come out of all that before he had his kids. So Jeremy just shared on the way we see the world and how powerful just your perspective is. And it was the most powerful thing I'd ever heard. So anyway, I wanted to announce that he's going to be here this coming Sunday. So get excited for that. And without further ado, Nate, come up here and share with us, man. Give Nate a hand.
All right, guys. So, man, I have so much in so many different places that I could go, and so many different places where God is just revealing Himself, revealing His love, or revealing His personality, and so much of it. All through Jesus. And sometimes, I would just like to get back, and this will probably be a pretty basic night tonight. So I'm going to we're going to go back and get into some Paul, and it's just going to be just basic stuff. Lord knows I could go to Matthew chapter 3 and just stay there for so long. I really could. That's where most of my listening with Dr. Lynn House has been in chapter 3. So I could really kind of go there and hang out for a while, but I'm not going to do that tonight. Guys, if you would go with me to Romans chapter 7. I'm going to be reading this, Jake, out of the Message version. King James version. I don't have a King James version Bible. So I read that of a Message, and man, I love the Message Bible for the epistles and for Paul and for stuff like that, man, because it's just right in your face stuff. It brings it out so well. And so we're going to be talking a little bit today about law and about grace, and how Paul is going to break this down right here. I think it's a beautiful thing. So if you could, with just first verse, we'll start off. It says, you shouldn't have any trouble understanding this, friends, for you know all the ins and outs of the law, how it works and how its power touches only the living. I want to stop right there and say that, I'll give you a little bit of a backdrop here. Paul is talking to who? Audience relevance. The Romans. Christian Romans that are Christian. So, and these guys are fully familiar with what? Why?
Because that's what they grew up under. That's what they read.
Okay, sure. That's it. They grew up under this thing, and actually Rome had infiltrated Jerusalem at this time, right? Or right before this, way before this. So Rome, man, they knew all the ins and outs of Jerusalem, of all this, which is stuff we just have been going over on Wednesday night. So, man, they knew the law. They knew all the ins and outs of it. Man, they knew it as well as the Jews in Jerusalem knew it. So I'm going to stop there and just kind of touch the scene, kind of set the scene here. He is talking to the Romans, the Christians there. It says, but he's going to get into something a little bit different now. It says, for instance, and what was he just talking about right there? The law. Okay, good. It says, for instance, a wife is legally tied to her husband while he lives, but if he dies, she's free. If she lives with another man while her husband is living, she's obviously an adulteress. But if he dies, she is quite free to marry another man in good conscience, with no one's disapproval. Now, I want to say for a second, man, when I first read this, and I was really like, now, why did Paul get off into some marriage stuff with divorce and marriage and another man and adultery? And I don't understand. That's the first thing my mind goes through. And then through Jake, man, through his teaching, through his preaching, I learn about this thing called law and grace. And I learn between a thing that was old covenant and new covenant. So in this passage here, Paul is talking about law and grace. Perry, can you come up here? CJ, can you come up here? And so I'm just going to do a little skit for you guys just for a second to kind of break this thing down. Okay, so you're going to be husband number one. Okay? You, CJ, are going to be husband number two. Okay? Okay. Now, I am going to be the bride. Now, who is the bride? I know. You guys are hit. No, I'm just kidding. Who's the bride? We are. The church, right? The bride. We are the chosen. We are his bride. So I'm going to pretend to be the bride. So I'm going to represent all you guys. And this is going to be the first husband. So what was the first thing that was given to us? Law. So this guy's going to represent law. Now, let's read this again. That's too far. Let's read this again. It says, oh, he backed up. Okay, for instance, a wife is legally tied to her husband while he lives. So if this law is alive, who am I tied to? The law. I'm legally bound to this thing right here. But if he dies, I'm free. Okay, the picture is becoming a little more real. I like this. Okay, so if she lives with another man while she is, or while her other husband is living, she's obviously an adulteress. This is starting to get real good now. Very interesting. Come on, you guys paying attention?
Yeah.
Okay, so she's obviously an adulteress. But if this first husband dies, but if he dies, I'm quite free to marry another man in good conscience with no one's disapproval. Right. All right, you guys can sit down, man. We're going to go into this. Thank you, sir. We're going to get into this a little deeper now, because this is what's happening, and this is what's happened in the church for far too long. Is the church has been committing adultery. Oh, man. That seemed pretty clear, that picture, that painting, that picture right there. Jake, can you move a little forward? Move to the next. There you go. So, my friends, this is something like what has taken place with you. When Christ died, he took that entire rule-dominated way of life down with him and left it where? Oh, man. Leaving you free to marry a resurrection life and bear offspring of faith for God. So this is what's happening, man. When he breaks this down, it's such a beautiful thing, because see what Christ has done is he's taken this old thing and he's left it down in the tomb. Now let me ask you something. Okay, God. If we pull up that old dead body from the tomb, Dave, and try to resurrect that thing, what's going to happen? Not good. Jake used this word several times. If you're trying to marry or have intimate relationship with the dead, it's called necrophiliac. I think that's a very, very bad charge. But there's something else, man. If you resurrect this thing, there's something else that I want to touch on, man, because it's really going to get good here for a second. If you resurrect this thing in your life, what is it going to do? It's gonna stink. It's true. So, man, it's gonna be like dragging around this old dead thing. We get it, Bernie. You're gonna be dragging around Bernie. And man, I promise you, if you get too far along in it, if you carry it too far with you, it's gonna start stinking up every aspect of your life.
And I get an amen. And those around you.
Right. Because what law does is it teaches us this by my own ability. It leaves out the bear offspring part of faith for God. Leaves that out. And instead what we do is, it talks about it here in just a second, is that our offspring is dead. It brings death with it. And so now, when I resurrect that old law stuff, what I'm doing is I'm bearing my offspring is death. Miscarriages, stillbirths, just death. Let's go a little further. I want to read just a little further. For as long as we lived that old way of life, doing whatever we felt we could get away with, sin was calling most of the shots, and the old law code hemmed us in. A little further. And this made us all the more... Oh, you see what law's doing here. You see what it's doing. And we're just going to make it real clear. It's not that the law was bad, Stacy. It was never bad. It was never bad. It was actually God's holy, insane counsel for you. I was going to explain this a little deeper. I don't want to get into this. In the end, all we had to show for it was miscarriages and stillbirths. In other words, there was no fruit coming from my life. Fruitless. I mean, are any of you guys familiar with what happened to the fig tree? What happened to the fig tree? Jesus cursed it. Sure did. Why did Jesus curse it? Because it was not bearing fruit. This is good, guys. This is really good. Let's go a little further. But now that we're no longer shackled, go back one more. There you go. No longer shackled to that domineering mate of sin. Man, I love how this words this thing. And out from under all those oppressive regulations and fine print, we're free to live a new life in the freedom of God. Man, I think we're going to stop right there for a moment in Romans. I don't want to get too far into it. I want to keep this thing pretty pure and simple. Is that we just cannot operate in both. We can't operate in both. We can't operate in law or a law-based system. And Paul gets pretty serious with this thing in Romans 7. He gets pretty serious with it in Galatians if you read it. He gets pretty serious with it in Ephesians if you read Ephesians. He's not playing around with this mixture stuff. Because he said, for the moment any one of you submits to circumcision or any other rule-keeping system, Christ's hard-won gift of freedom is squandered. awesome is that we just cannot. We cannot go back to this law thing. We can't resurrect it. We can't pull it out of the grave. And where I work with a bunch of guys in a rehab, and I am so into these guys, this stuff. And I'm actually telling them, hey, I hope that you're learning this so well and you become so bold with it that when you hear someone pulling that old law out of the tomb, that you say, hey, that's not right. And you confront them. Okay, let's get back to grace. Don't confront them in front of everyone. Go to them after service and say, hey, I love you. Your message is wrong. I'm serious. Man, we are to raise up the leaders. That's on us. We are to raise up the next leaders. And man, if we don't put them in an ability, or give them an ability to say, hey, something's not right here, then all we're doing is handicapping them. Because you see, love's not always, oh, CJ, I just love you. Love is not always that way. In fact, sometimes, Perry, it actually can be very hurtful and correcting and make us feel ways that we're not really comfortable feeling. That's love. You know, Denny Silk in our book told us, he said, as we're reading this thing, and he says, you don't really know if you even have love in the relationship until you guys are going to war. Put down your weapon. No, you put down your. Isn't that a good picture? And so, we go through the motions, but where the love goes. So I'm going to try to get back onto this thing. So I'm going to give you, we're going to go to two more places. I'm not going to be very much longer at all. So I want to go to 1 Corinthians 15:56. And you might pull up the King James version of this, or the Young's Literal Translation, or English Standard Version, whichever choice. The Message is a little, 1 Corinthians 15:56. The next thing we're going to talk about is what gives law this strength to resurrect all this dead, stinky stuff in my life, man. And if I operate in it, what's going to happen? So law, it says, the sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. The strength of sin is the law. So Dave, if I'm operating in law, what's going to be the strongest point in my life?
If you're operating in law, what's going to be the strongest point of your life? Sin.
Yeah. If I'm operating in law, my strong suit's going to be sin. Man, if I keep following these rules and guidelines and I leave the Holy Spirit on the curb, my life is going to be filled with sin. Now, but you might say, well, Nate, didn't Jesus take care of sin? He sure did. He sure did. You no longer owe a debt to God. You have been made righteous through Jesus Christ. But I promise you, you go out there and you get into some of this stuff and you will still feel all the limitations of sin. Does that make sense? You see, so many people want to say, oh, I'm not going to preach grace because grace is just a license to sin and we can't teach that and we don't want them to get everybody all slippery. But here it is right here. We're going to lay it on the wire. We're going to lay it on the line. I'm not totally free to choose from my own heart until law has been removed. And man, God didn't create us to be robots. He created us to be sons and daughters. He created us because he wanted us to choose out of our very hearts to love him. And we just simply cannot do that. We simply can't do it if we're trying to follow a curriculum. Does that make sense? Oh, this is good. This is so good. This stuff is good because now, man, I can learn how to love. I can learn how to follow him. Not because I'm told to. Not because someone expects me to. Not because it's on the bulletin board for the week. Not because it was something I seen typed up on a pretty sheet of paper in the bathroom. But it's because, man, I choose to from my very own heart. One more place I want to take you guys, man. I want to solidify this thing. So if law is the strength of sin, man, what hope do I have? Jake, if you could go to Titus chapter 2, verses 11 and 12. We're going to roll right on to Titus a little bit. Love Mr. Titus. And so the next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about this grace. What is grace actually doing for me? Okay, if you remove the law, here comes all the scary stuff. Now I have freedom. Now I have a whole lot of freedom. Now I feel like the children of Israel as they came up out of Egypt, and I'm thinking, look at all the stuff there is to do. What do I get into first? And it's kind of scary. It can get scary. Because some of us, man, we get that little taste of freedom, and some of us want to take it a little too far. And Galatians talks about that. Galatians chapter 5 talks about it. Galatians chapter 1, I think, talks about it. And it says, hey, grace is not this thing. You know, you have to have grace for you to choose. But you have been set free at the same time. Totally free. Linda, you're absolutely 100% free to go out there and choose to do whatever you want to do. It doesn't... and your choice will never change what God says about you. It will never change the fact that he chose you first. Does that make sense? None of that changes, but what does change is consequence. You go out, you do a bunch of dope, you get arrested, you go to jail. Hopefully, in the next few years, you make the decision to go out and do dope, you get in trouble, and they send you to rehab so that you can get some treatment. You go out and you steal a car, you're probably going to do some time. We still feel all the effects of sin. We're still going to feel it, but it doesn't change what's been done about it. Does that make sense? So grace, let's read this together. 11. For the grace of God that bringeth salvation hath appeared to all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. So, man, let's break this verse down a little bit. I love this. So, at the beginning of 11, it says, for the grace of God. And then at 12 says, teaching us. So, it's grace that actually teaches me to deny ungodliness and worldly lusts and how to live soberly and to be righteous and godly. For when? For when? For right now. For today. This present world. Right now. So, man, if I don't have this, if I got all this law in me, man, I'm operating by the law, man, I'll be stinking up some things. But if I get, what is grace? When you say the word grace, it's not just a word or a thing. What is it? Oh, it's a person. It's a person. Let's substitute the word grace for Jesus. Can we do that? Oh man, come on one time. For the grace of God, for it was the Jesus of God that bringeth salvation. Hath appeared to all men, and he taught us to deny ungodliness and worldly lusts, and we should live soberly and righteously and godly right here for today. Some of us struggle sometimes with the whole law thing because it was good. It was good. It was meant for good. You know, and I have to kind of look at it like this. I kind of have to look at it like this. If you were to have an experience with God to where he delivered you from slavery, and man, it had been for generations, your grandparents, man, they were in this bondage. You were in this bondage. It's all you've ever known. And then all of a sudden, some guy comes and he drags you out of the only place you've ever known. And then finally, when you get to this, you end at a dead end, and you're at this, the sea, the Red Sea is on one side of you, and everybody looked back and they seen Pharaoh's army coming from the other direction. I can't even imagine what the people felt. Okay, Moses, you got us out of there, but now we're trapped and we're all going to surely die. Here comes Pharaoh's men. But then something happened. There was a column of fire. Come on. Came up. Can you imagine what that looked like, or what it felt like to have personally been there? A column of fire comes up and separates the children of Israel and Pharaoh's army. And then Moses goes over and takes his staff and says, kaboosh. And the Red Sea goes and splits in two. And that's all you've ever seen or known of God. That's going to be pretty scary. I'm gonna be pretty safe. It's safe to say, brother. It's safe to say that you're probably gonna say, no, sir. Ain't going nowhere near that dude. So when he called, he said, man, I want to be your God, and I want you guys to be my people. This is going to be awesome. And they said, yes, but we're not coming close to you. We're going to send Moses, and you just tell us how to live, and we'll do it. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And Moses goes up on the mountain. He says, okay, God, well, this is the deal. Fear. You know, you struck fear in their hearts, God. You're pretty awesome. I mean, a column of fire, the Red Sea. You know, they're just kind of scared of you, God. But they asked me they told me to say, hey, listen, we'll create a covenant together, and you tell us how to live, and they'll do it. And the first thing I could just picture God was going, man, I'm not going to tell you how to live. But here, I'll tell you what not to do. I think he personally, man, he wanted a relationship from the beginning. He wanted connection from the very beginning. He never wanted to tell the children of Israel how to live. Man, he wanted them to live freely and on their own. And he wanted them to live out of the abundance of their hearts. that is what Jesus has done for us. Because of what he did on the cross. And all the other stuff that's just unsaid sometimes that Jesus did and finished. Because of that, today, Stacy, I'm free to choose out of my heart what I want to do. I'm free to say, you know what, God, I love you. Not because I have to, not because you told me to, but because you showed me first. Today, guys, I would like to challenge you. Tonight, I would like to challenge you to continue moving towards the person of grace. Pull close, draw near. He says, draw nigh unto me and I will draw near, nigh unto you. Man, we can get as close as you want to get close. Let's, as a body, as a people, as God's children, his chosen, that's everybody, right? Let's stop living out of fear and being afraid of the radical. Let's draw closer to him. Let's not be like the children of Israel were and say, God, your power is awesome, but it scares me. Let's say, God, your power is awesome. Use me. Use me. I want you to use me, God. Work through me. I know my hands can't, but I know you can through my hands. I know my voice can't, but I know you can through my voice. I know my legs don't want to, but I know you can through my legs. Because, you see, he chooses to use us because he chose to live in us. In us. So guys, I know it's tough, I know it's a challenge, but I am challenging you